Hi, my name is Nicole Coute, and I'm going to be presenting on Johann Peter Muller. My presentation isn't so creative. I'm not the most creative person, but the information that I have is super interesting. It's super important. I didn't know really what I was getting into when I started researching this guy. I just knew that he was kind of into physiology and anatomy, and it aligned with kinesiology, which is my major. So as I went along, I kind of learned that Johann Peter Muller, he was German. He lived in Germany most of his life. And he was actually born in 1801, so at the turn of the 19th century in Koblenz, Germany. He was born to a very modest family, and his father was a leather saddler. So he was kind of supposed to go into, the family business, and our teacher saw that he was very smart. So his teacher went to his family, kind of convinced him he shouldn't go into the family business of being a leather saddler, but that he should probably go to college. He was brilliant in math and natural sciences, and he had a real, he was just brilliant. He was, flying high. So his parents agreed. He went to college at probably around like 16, and he went to the University of Bonn by the time he was 18, and there he decided he wanted to be a priest. So he started to study religion and the priesthood, but he got bored. He was too smart. He was very interested in the natural sciences and the way the body worked, so he decided to turn to. And by the time he was, 21, I believe, he received his MD. And, back then you could get that so young. It was a lot different than the structured education now. So he became a doctor at the ripe age of 21. And then he decided to leave there in 1822. And he went to study his boards in Berlin. So Berlin was a little more progressive. It wasn't as, traditional as Bonn. It was very more, less philosophical, less religion. It was a little more, how did things really come about? It was really the science behind everything, if, I were to say that. So while he was in Berlin, he became a little more progressive, and he decided to take those teachings back to Bonn and become a professor and take over the program there. So in 1824, he went back to Bonn, became a professor, had, a seat. He led a school there, and he built a beautiful school there. And he became the most renowned physiologist of the 19th century. And nobody knows that. He's someone that started in math, started in religion, and he just moved on and just followed what his heart told him to do. He did suffer from depression. He suffered from a great deal of mental illness. And he did die very young at, 56. And they think that he did commit suicide. His brilliant mind, as a lot of brilliant minds do, just the creativity and the stress of it all. It was there was a European Revolution at the same time. And he was also he was rescued from a boat and he almost drowned at, a few years before then. So they think all the mental anguish, it was too much on him. So the most exciting part of this was that I figured out about the Mullerian Duct. And let me tell you about the Mullerian Duct. That's the originating word of it. And it is actually the duct that begins in an embryo. You know how you can't tell the sex of a baby until about, 14 to 18 weeks. And then they tell you 18 to 20 weeks in the ultrasound, what the baby's going to be. So this Mullerian duct is actually the beginning in the embryo of whether it's going to be a boy or a girl. So it's already there. The Mullerian duct is already there at the trunk of the embryo. It's discovered around 1826 by Johann Peter Muller. So he was kind of, getting into his anatomy, physiology, and he was really the first one to really use a microscope to really look at cells, really look at cancers, really look at that. So he got into physiology. He really looked at the embryo and saw these two little ducts. What it does is let me show you the picture. Let me show you this thing. So here's the picture. If you can see where my little pointy thing is. So this is like the trunk of the embryo. These little horn things right here. So they would be. So the Mullerian ducts are here. These blue little things here and here. You got your kidneys, and then you have right here, those are going to turn into the testes if it's going to be a boy. If it's a girl, these Mullerian ducts stay and into the whole female reproductive system. So over here on the left side of my picture, if you're facing it, this is going to turn into a blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a chick. The oviduct, the ovary, the Mullerian duct is going to create the female reproductive system. However, if genetics say it's going to be a boy here, it's going to show that the Mullerian duct will actually retract. At the same time, there's a Wolffian duct. And the Wolffian duct starts the same time right here in the middle as the Mullerian duct. So if the Mullerian duct leaves, the Wolffian duct stays. And it forms the testes, and it's going to be a boy. So this is why it takes so long to find out if it's a boy or a girl, because you have to give time, if it's a boy, for this Mullerian duct to retract. You have to give it time to disappear so that the male reproductive system can fully form. Same as in the women's. So this Wolffian duct will disappear. It will, they call it degenerate. It will degenerate, and the female reproductive will to be formed by the Mullerian duct. It's a hormone thing. So the hormones from those ducts form, but the other one has to digress. It has to disappear. Otherwise, say for in a male, if the Mullerian duct stays, it's Mullerian duct syndrome, which means the male, it could still be a boy, have the parts, have everything going on, but it will still, if that Mullerian duct stays there, then the hormone stays there, and it will grow some female reproductive parts as well. There's surgery for it, and then hormone replacement if there needs to be surgery for the male, same as the female. There's rare. It's rare, but it happens. And that was so interesting to me, how that process begins, because some people think that it's determined, you just can't tell. When really it's not determined. Up until probably the 10th week is when the other tract will digress or disappear, and the other one's able to fully form. So no, it's not decided until, you know, the genes say, hey, the hormones happen and everything forms. So nothing's decided on the embryo when it's first in there scientifically. So crazy. So that was the biggest thing and the biggest part of my paper that I thought was so interesting. Also, totally off the subject. So he went after that, he did all that, his whole physiology thing and his whole, you know, embryonic interest thing. He went into the sensory, the sensors and everything in the body through the peripheral nervous system, and he started researching specifically the eyes. He actually made a lot of scientific discovery in the retina, and he kind of almost justified people having visions, if I could say, without them being crazy. So he realized that the eyes not only respond to external stimulation, but internal stimulation as well. So if you're imagining something and you think that you see it, it's because your brain is really telling you that you're actually seeing it. And he totally proved that, you know, through, you know, the imagination in your head, the pictures you're seeing in your head, your eyes can actually see it. You can feel that you can see it. So if you're sleeping, it's just like how you see your dreams. So he proved that you're actually seeing it, which is super crazy. So it really made a lot of people feel better, you know, about themselves. He really dug in, which is huge to my, you know, to my major, are the reflexes. When your eyes, you know, respond to external light and things like that, people always thought like all your nerves kind of work together. You hear it, you see it, everything just constantly works together. But he discovered that each sensory works independently on their own. And it's so important about that, because even though we all kind of feel like everything works together, there's a part of the Bible where it says, it's actually in Matthew chapter 6, and it says like the eye is the lamp of the body, and if the eye is healthy, then the whole body is full of light. And I don't really like that saying, because I don't feel that that's necessarily true. I feel like some people are born blind, some people are born deaf, and your other senses kind of take over. So he proved that they work independently, but he also proved that one takes over for another. So if you're blind, then your sense of taste gets stronger. Your ears, you know, your hearing gets stronger. Your sense of touch is more sensitive. Your perception of everything around you is so much stronger. And I feel like the Bible really misquoted on that, because it doesn't mean that anything inside of you is brighter just because, you know, your vision's great, and that's what it's implying, you know, saying that your eyes are healthy. I feel like if your soul is happy, you know, other things take over and make you happy. You may lose something in life, but other things take over, and really your heart can shine no matter what part of your physical body is damaged. And that's really important to me, and that's something working on this paper really interested me about him, is even though his beginning roots were in religion, he was still able to see the facts of the world and not apply everything straight back to religion. So there's nothing foggy for him. He kept those values, and even though he struggled with depression, you know, he seemed to really continue his work and continue and do what he loved, to help people around the world and to prove things and, you know, jump hurdles that no one had ever jumped before. So I hope you learned something very important and things that will carry you throughout the rest of your life. And thank you so much for listening.